Susan Tran once threatened to walk away from the table over a comma. Not a clause, not a pricing model, not a delay, an actual comma. That was month 2. By month 6, we were swapping gifs of raccoons and hard hats and texting at midnight during system outages. That's how deep I was in the foxhole with her. Every demand, every ridiculous change order, every fire started by my own engineering team, I handled it. Quietly, ruthlessly, exhaustingly. The $3 million deal with Cygnus Sec was my Mount Everest. I didn't scale it. I dragged it up the hill in a snowstorm wearing clearance rack heels and a smile that cracked around the edges. There was no cavalry, no collaboration despite what the org chart liked to pretend. It was me. Just me. My back, my weekends, my inbox at 2 a.m. My personal miles flying cross-country to smooth things over when our VP of product forgot about a security escalation meeting with Susan's COO. And I did it because I believed in the damn thing. And yeah, because I'm good at this. Really good. By the way, if you're enjoying stories like this, do us a small favor. Tap that subscribe button and give it a like. You wouldn't believe how much it helps the team keep making these. You'll never miss when the corporate chaos hits the fan again. All right, back to the mess. Jason showed up around month 5. New title, Director of Strategic Accounts. Translation, middleman with a crisp shirt and too much cologne. He didn't know the client. He didn't know the product, but he knew how to talk. Loudly. In meetings he didn't belong in. He'd pop in mid-call, unmuted, derail a technical discussion with something like, "Let's elevate the value prop here," and then vanish, leaving me to clean it up. I kept my head down, took notes, did the actual work. I remember the first time Susan mentioned him. "Is Jason new?" she asked after a Slack thread where he had tried and failed to explain our own bundling discount logic. I laughed and said he's still installing his ego. She laughed harder than I expected. That was the moment I realized this deal didn't belong to the company. It didn't even belong to Jason. It was between me and Susan. We'd built it brick by brick, patch by patch. Still, I wasn't blind. I saw the signs. Jason started showing up to internal forecast meetings with slides I hadn't reviewed. He began referencing our Cygnus Sec strategy like he'd lifted the whole thing from birth. I once heard him telling our CFO he was personally overseeing the integration planning. I stared at the Zoom screen so hard my pupils vibrated. Personally. He couldn't even pronounce half of what was in the requirements doc without phoning me first. But I kept my poker face, kept logging hours, kept building the back-end trust, the real kind that doesn't come from titles or org charts. The kind that gets you a 1 a.m. call when their systems crash and no one else picks up. The kind that makes you indispensable even if you're not flashy. Especially if you're not flashy. The final pricing model took me 3 weeks of back and forth with Susan's finance lead, complete with side-by-side spreadsheet battles and time zone gymnastics. When we finally agreed, Susan pinged me with a champagne emoji. "You deserve hazard pay," she wrote. I saved the message in a folder titled Receipts. I didn't know I'd need it yet, but my gut whispered something I didn't want to hear. Jason booked an alignment meeting with executive leadership without looping me in. I found out when our VP forwarded me the invite with, "Glad to see your deal's about to close." Your deal. I stared at the screen. My name wasn't on the deck. I wasn't even CC'd on the follow-up. Just a comment bubble on the last slide that said, "Final client-facing owner, Jason M." I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I clicked File, then Download, and opened a new folder called Endgame. Because Jason just made the worst mistake you can make in this business. He forgot whose fingerprints were all over the product. He thought the finish line made him the runner. And I don't mind being invisible until it's time to remind people exactly who lit the path. The Monday meeting was supposed to be a formality, just a check-in with senior leadership before we moved into final sign-off territory with Cygnus Sec. I logged in with my notes prepped, status updates ready, timeline pinned to the minute. I even put on a damn blazer despite it being a camera-optional call. That's how much pride I still had in this deal. The PowerPoint file Jason shared in the meeting chat was titled Cygnus Sec Final Positioning Q3 Enterprise Growth. Harmless enough, I clicked. Page 1 had the company logo, Jason's name, his title. No mention of me. That wasn't unusual. He always led with himself. But by slide 5, the bile hit the back of my throat. Slide 6 was a timeline. Initial discovery, right arrow scope, right arrow integration, right arrow final pricing. Except every single milestone I'd bled for was now tagged with a different color bar. Led by Jason M. There was a full breakdown of client sentiment improvements under new leadership guidance. Bullet points about rebuilding trust, streamlined pricing discussions, executive to executive rapport. I stared so long I forgot to blink. My name wasn't mentioned once. Not in the notes, not in the footers, not in the team structure slide, not even as a contributor. I had been erased, scrubbed like a bad number off a spreadsheet. I sat frozen in that Zoom square, camera still off. Jason was speaking like he'd been there from day one. The client was skeptical at first, he said. That smug little chuckle he used when he thought he was charming. But once we reset expectations and reframed the value conversation at the leadership level, things began to shift. The VP of sales nodded along. I watched it all unfold like I wasn't even on the damn call. After the meeting, I sent Jason a message. No emojis, no exclamation points. Hey, noticed I wasn't on the deck. Oversight? He replied 2 minutes later. Not really. Just trying to streamline things at the leadership layer. Don't worry, everyone knows you've been helping behind the scenes. Helping behind the scenes. I stared at that message like it was a death certificate. I didn't even know which part of it to scream at. The casual erasure? The word helping, like I'd been fetching coffee for his vision? Or the breathtaking gall of everyone knows, when it was clear Jason had spent the last few weeks laying narrative track to ride straight into a promotion. I requested a one-on-one. He accepted with a little thumbs-up reaction. Smug bastard even scheduled it on my calendar with a subject line, Project Alignment Cygnus Sec. I joined the video call 10 minutes early just to practice keeping my voice steady. He came in 3 minutes late, holding a smoothie and wearing his usual I'm just chill leadership hoodie. He didn't even pretend to make small talk. So I said, smiling because I'd rather bite down on glass than let him see me crack, you decided to remove me from the narrative entirely. Jason sipped his smoothie and tilted his head like I was being cute. Diane, he said, voice oily, the client only cares about leadership optics. You're operationally solid, and I respect that. But at this stage, it's all about perception. Executive alignment, brand confidence. Brand confidence? I asked, still smiling, but something behind my eyes probably flickered. You've been phenomenal, he said, like he was patting a dog on the head. But this needs to look seamless to the board. You get it. You're a team player. I muted my mic before I laughed, not because I found it funny. Because the laugh that wanted to come out was too jagged, too loud, too unhinged for the sterile beige backdrop of his office. I unmuted and said, of course, makes sense. Happy to support the optics however I can. He leaned back, relaxed now that he thought he'd gotten his way. Knew you'd understand. I left the call, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water with hands that were only slightly shaking. I stared out the window at the rusted HVAC unit on the next building over and whispered, brand confidence, to no one. That was the moment it stopped being a deal. It became a message. And the message was, you do the work and they'll steal the credit. You stay silent and they'll write you out of your own story. Jason thought he'd taken something from me. He had no idea what I was about to take back. I started with the smile. That same rehearsed, polished grin I'd used in hundreds of client calls, the one that says I'm fine, nothing's wrong, even when everything's on fire. I wore it like war paint, because Jason didn't deserve my anger. Not yet. He hadn't earned it. Totally understand, I told him in our next sync. Happy to support you behind the scenes if that's where I'm most valuable. He beamed like a toddler handed a plastic steering wheel and told he's driving the car. That's the kind of attitude we need, he said, spinning some nonsense about unified messaging and hierarchical clarity. I nodded, took notes. Let him think I was small, agreeable, conquered, but every of course from my lips came laced with arsenic. Because what I said and what I meant had parted ways the moment he deleted my name off that deck. I didn't rage quit, didn't storm HR. I got methodical, precise, surgical. The next morning, I sent Susan a simple email, subject line, Q3 wrap-up and continued alignment. Short, warm, professional. Attached the final Q3 performance summary Jason hadn't bothered to send her. I highlighted our 12% increase in security patch response time, the newly implemented SSO integration, and included 3 screenshots showing active client-side usage, each captioned with a brief note in my voice. Signed plainly, Diane Wells, Senior Enterprise Account Manager. Nothing flashy, just receipts, quiet reminders. She replied in under 20 minutes. Thanks, Diane, this is perfect. Appreciate your thoroughness again. Again. I forwarded that message to myself and tagged it anchor. Because that's what it was. A tiny, steel-cord nail pinning me back into the narrative, one Susan knew wasn't Jason's to tell. Every few days, I dropped another breadcrumb. A compliance document with tracked changes. A Slack thread forwarded to the client's tech lead, showing where I'd personally resolved a licensing bug. When our billing system glitched and overcharged them by 4%, I spotted it first and sent a correction email before Jason even knew there was an issue. The subject line, flagged, incorrect billing on invoice hash 1134 resolved. Susan, CFO, replied, Diane, thank you for staying on top of this. You've been a lifesaver this quarter. I didn't forward that one to Jason, but I starred it and filed it with the rest. He, meanwhile, was too busy rehearsing his big boy PowerPoint voice. Scheduling executive syncs with leadership, parroting buzzwords from client calls. I was still running behind the scenes. He once messaged me mid-call asking what log4j mitigation meant because it was mentioned in Susan's weekly update and he didn't want to look uninformed in the next visibility huddle. I answered, quickly, kindly, and added his confusion to my private timeline. Then came the integration checklist Susan's engineering team requested. Jason forwarded it to me without comment. So I built the whole thing, every deliverable, every status note, every line item update. When I was done, I sent it directly to the lead engineer and Susan, noting at the bottom, please don't hesitate to reach out with any follow-up. Always happy to support Cygnus Sec's progress. Susan's reply, as always. Her attention to detail is unmatched. Let's set up a final pass-through next week before sign-off, I responded politely. CC'd Jason, of course, but I didn't invite him to that meeting, and I didn't mention his name in the prep notes. The truth is, I didn't need to sabotage him. I just had to let the facts lie where they belonged. Jason was busy selling the illusion of value. I was just quietly proving mine. And with every quiet confirmation, every thank you, every data point filed away under undeniable, something inside me started to shift. I didn't want my name back on the deck. I wanted something more final, something that left no room for erasure. So I smiled when Jason told me the final meeting was set, just him and Susan. I'll be on standby, I said sweetly. Let me know how it goes. Then I hung up, opened my personal inbox, and searched for Susan Tran's assistant's number. The plan was ready. All I needed now was the right moment to pull the thread. Jason was the kind of man who could start a fire, hand you the extinguisher, then climb on a podium and take credit for putting it out. That's exactly what he did, over and over again, during the final 2 weeks of the deal. The closer we got to signing, the more things suddenly went wrong. Not real crises, nothing that couldn't be fixed in a few hours, just enough friction to make him panic and toss the flaming bag of nonsense into my lap. SSO broke during sandbox testing. Diane, can you take a quick look? Legal pushed back on our data retention clause. Diane, do me a favor and finesse this a little, will you? Cygnus Sex devs asked for clarification on our audit logs. Hey, loop Diane in, she knows the weeds better than I do. And like a good little ghost, I floated in, fixed everything, and floated right back out, smiling. But this time I left a trail. Every response I sent, every fix I delivered was CC'd not just to Jason, but to Susan's COO, her VP of Ops, and occasionally her tech lead. Just enough visibility to show who was actually solving problems, without waving a neon he's lying sign in the sky. Subject, updated audit controls per queue and a thread. Hi James, per your team's request. I've updated the log parameters to align with Cygnus Sex v3 security standards. You'll find all changes documented in the attached changelog. Let me know if there's anything else you'd like adjusted before final review. Jason replied 10 minutes later with, looks great. Thanks, team, cute. He didn't even open the attachment. But James did. I saw the read receipt. When a billing hiccup sent a duplicate invoice to Cygnus Sex finance team, Jason forwarded it to me with, can you clean this up before Susan sees it? I fixed it. Then I emailed their controller directly. Subject, correction invoice #1128. Hi Alyssa, apologies for the duplicate, systems bug triggered an autosend, already voided and reconciled. Appreciate your patience. Diane. Alyssa's response, thanks Diane, you always catch these before we even have to ask. That one went in the folder titled Endgame External Receipts. Meanwhile, Jason scheduled another visibility sync with our execs. When I skimmed the meeting recap he posted in Slack, it was a masterclass in fiction writing. Integration cleanup now complete per my direct oversight. Billing resolved, nothing missed thanks to our proactive internal checks. Client sentiment remains high as we approach closeout. Susan seems confident in our leadership. I didn't comment, didn't react. I just clicked save as and dropped the PDF into my Gaslight Chronicles folder. I also started using track changes religiously. Every doc he asked me to polish, I revised in a way that made my edits impossible to ignore. Original, Jason M., led the integration review with Cygnus Sex engineering team. Revised, integration review completed by D. Wells with Cygnus Sex engineering team on 10/3. Summary notes attached. No one ever reverted it. Then came the real kicker. Jason called me late on a Thursday. I was still at my desk, eating lukewarm noodles and revising the final product roadmap document Susan's team had flagged. You're a machine, he said cheerfully. Listen, I owe you big time. I'll make sure leadership knows how crucial you've been when this wraps. I didn't laugh, didn't roll my eyes. I just said, thanks, Jason. Just happy to support where I can. And I opened my diary log and wrote down his exact words. Timestamp, call duration. Summary, owes me. We'll make sure leadership knows. Smiling like he means it, doesn't? The thing is, Jason didn't realize he was sharpening the knife with every ask. He didn't see how the small indignities, the casual commands, the credit theft, the blind belief that I would stay silent, were stacking into a record of betrayal I could weaponize at the perfect moment. And I wasn't angry anymore, not really. I was cold, focused, patient. He thought he was building a throne, but every block he stacked was one I'd handed him. And every time he called for help, I answered, calm, precise, documenting. Because the best kind of trap isn't sprung in anger, it's laid in silence, reinforced with facts, and then sealed with a smile. The invite never came. I checked my inbox 5 times that morning, even cleared the spam folder like some sad, desperate intern hoping an email would magically materialize and remind me I still mattered. But no, nothing from Jason, nothing from Ops, nothing from Susan's assistant either. Just a silence so loud it felt like a fire alarm I couldn't shut off. I found out about the meeting by accident. Well, Accident the way slipping on a banana peel someone deliberately left on your desk is an accident. The thread was buried deep in a Slack channel Jason didn't realize I still had access to. Hash Q3 client closeout. I wasn't tagged, but I saw it when I searched Cygnus Sec hoping to catch some drift of the internal wind. Jason had messaged the VP of sales, locked in final client pitch for Thursday. One-on-one with Susan, leaning into the narrative that we turned the ship around at the leadership level. Final deck is tight, no fluff. VP responded with a thumbs up and, love it, keep it high level. Sell the transformation story. Sell the transformation story. I clicked on the thread attachments. The deck was slick, branded with our Next Horizon campaign styling, full of action verbs and polished graphics and performance charts I had built. I had updated the usage metrics. I had built that user engagement snapshot after manually cross-referencing API logs when engineering couldn't be bothered. Slide 7 made me stop breathing for a second. Key milestone contributors: Jason M., VP of Product, Director of Compliance, Engineering Lead. No Diane Wells, not even a line at the bottom, not even special thanks. It wasn't an oversight, it was a surgical removal. I didn't feel rage, not this time, not even humiliation. That had all burned off like fog under sunlight weeks ago. What I felt now was cleaner, sharper, like glass. I stood up, closed my laptop, and walked out of my apartment barefoot, just to feel something solid under me. The sidewalk was cold. The air had that early fall bite, the kind that smells like dry leaves and dying daylight. It was funny. After 6 months of sacrifice, of swallowing ego, skipping weekends, keeping every damn wheel turning, I wasn't surprised anymore. I had finally stopped expecting decency from people like Jason. Real surprise was that I'd let myself hope this company might be different. Hope's a funny drug. Feels warm at first, then it just keeps you still while they bleed you dry. I came back inside and made tea calmly, like someone waiting on a weather report they already knew was bad. Then I opened the deck again, this time with surgical precision. I scrolled through every slide, every sentence, every attribution. I took screenshots, time-stamped them, created a new folder titled Final Cut Severance Edition. Then I read Jason's speaker notes. What we've done here is rebuild trust, not just deliverables. This was about changing the tone of the relationship, elevating the strategic narrative. I closed the deck, stared at my ceiling fan for a while, because here's the thing, you don't erase a woman like me without consequences. You don't build your fantasy promotion on someone else's scars and think it'll hold. Jason thought he'd engineered the perfect heist, a credit theft with plausible deniability, gift-wrapped in jargon and PowerPoint. He thought I'd sit home like a good little worker bee, clapping politely while he cashed in my loyalty. But what he didn't understand was that I was past loyalty, past fairness, past trying to fix a game that had never been built for me to win. He wasn't just trying to cut me out. He was building a house with no foundation. I was the earthquake coming for it. I didn't plan the call to be some dramatic ambush. There was no speech rehearsed in the mirror, no shot of bourbon beforehand. It was instinct, clean and quiet, the way a surgeon reaches for a scalpel without looking. I just picked up my phone, found the contact for Susan's assistant, Carla, and hit dial. It rang twice. Hey Carla, it's Diane Wells. A pause, then a warm, if slightly surprised, hi Diane. How are you? Everything okay? I smiled. Not the email kind, not the fake Zoom grid kind. A real one, small and tired and full of all the months I'd spent holding this damn deal together with duct tape and diplomacy. I just wanted to say thank you, I said, for everything, the whole ride. You've been incredible to work with. Carla hesitated. I could hear her trying to figure out if this was a goodbye or a breakdown. Well, thank you, Diane. You've been amazing through all of this. Really, are you not? Wait, are you not in the meeting Thursday? And there it was. I almost didn't say it. Almost let her keep believing whatever Jason had peddled, but something about the quiet crackle of the phone line made it feel too intimate for lies. Nope, I said, soft, clipped, controlled, apparently leadership optics. The line went still. I could hear her breath catch. I'll check something and get back to you, she said quickly. No need, I replied, just as calm. I know where I stand. Hung up before the tremor in my voice could escape. Later that night, my phone buzzed. Susan, direct, not a text, not an email, a call. I stared at the screen for a second, then answered. Hi, Susan, Diane, she said. Her voice was low and deliberate, the way it got when she was about to dismantle someone in a boardroom. You're not on the final meeting invite? It wasn't a question. It was disbelief wearing the costume of a question. I let a beat pass. No, I said, apparently. Leadership optics, another beat. The silence stretched like a rubber band, tight, thin, dangerous. Interesting, she said finally. I didn't say anything, neither did she. That was the thing about Susan. She wasn't the kind of leader who filled silence with fluff. She let it echo. She let it mean something. Then she added, thanks for letting me know. Click. She hung up. I sat on the edge of my couch, holding the dead phone like it might start speaking again. The air around me had shifted. It was the kind of stillness you feel right before a lightning strike, when your skin prickles and your instincts whisper don't move. Because something was coming, not noise, not drama, just power. Susan wasn't the kind of woman to storm out of a meeting or send a WTF Slack to a vendor. She was the kind of woman who filed things, remembered things, made decisions in silence and executed them with precision. And now she knew. Not everything, not the folders and the receipts and the dozen ways Jason had tried to repackage my labor as his epiphany. But she knew the only part that mattered. I wasn't there, and she knew why. The air in my apartment felt electric. I couldn't sleep, couldn't sit still. I watched the clock slide past midnight, then one, then two. I wasn't waiting for anything, not exactly. But I could feel the storm forming somewhere above the clouds, and I wasn't scared. I was ready. Jason showed up to the final meeting dressed like a catalog ad for competence, navy suit, crisp white shirt, no tie, just enough stubble to look disruptive but not unemployed. He logged into the Zoom 5 minutes early because people like Jason think punctuality earns them moral authority. He adjusted his webcam, checked his lighting, smiled at his reflection. Then he exhaled like he was about to pitch Tesla to the Pope. Morning, everyone. Gan, voice smooth, cheerful, confident enough to bottle and sell to venture capitalists. On the other side of the screen, Susan sat back in her chair. Her Zoom square was perfectly lit, but her expression unreadable. Her camera didn't flicker. Her eyes didn't flinch. Her lips were pressed into the kind of line that could be mistaken for a smile if you didn't know better. Jason didn't know better. I wanted to start by saying how excited we are to finalize this partnership. He said it's been a journey, a real transformation. I think we've all seen the shift since we streamlined the account from a leadership level. What you're getting now is clarity, focus, and direct accountability. Susan blinked, that was it. He kept going. I've personally overseen every integration pain point since Q2. From sandbox testing to billing reconciliation, I've made it a priority to rebuild trust where things had, let's be honest, slipped a bit under previous alignment. Previous alignment, that would be me. I think you'll agree, he said, pulling up the deck, that our results speak for themselves. The screen shared flawlessly. He walked them through every chart, every bullet point like a man on a TED stage. Monthly usage trends, ticket resolution times, uptime logs, forecasted impact. All neatly packaged in Jason's confident baritone, just enough pause before each slide to give it gravitas. What he didn't mention, the invoices I'd flagged and fixed, the 3 a.m. email chains I'd walked Susan's tech team through, the emergency escalations routed through me, not him, the hours of client handholding he'd outsourced to me. Susan watched, said nothing. Her COO nodded once mechanically when Jason pointed out the improved cross-functional trust since redefining executive points of contact. Her VP of engineering adjusted his glasses and coughed into a fist. Jason didn't notice. He smiled as he neared the final slide, like he'd already hung the promotion plaque on his office wall. I want to close by saying how much we appreciate the renewed faith you've placed in us. This partnership means everything to our future growth in the cybersecurity space, and I can personally guarantee that moving forward, we'll be working with a leadership team that understands your needs at every level. He leaned back in his chair, that smug, self-satisfied lean, the one that says, I nailed it. Give me my gold star. Susan tapped her pen against her desk, then she looked up. Calm, direct, Jason's smile held. The silence stretched just a little too long. Then Susan tilted her head and asked, in a tone so flat it could have been mistaken for casual, I'm sorry, who are you again? Jason's face froze. The smile faltered, just for a beat, like someone pulled the battery from behind his eyes. Susan didn't blink, didn't repeat the question. Jason stammered, sorry, I'm Jason, Director of Strategic Accounts. We've been syncing weekly for the last few. Susan raised a hand, not a dramatic wave, just emotion, small, efficient, enough to cut him off. Right, she said, it's just the deal I've been negotiating wasn't with you. Jason's throat moved like he'd swallowed a pine cone. He opened his mouth again, closed it, then laughed, weakly of course. Diane's been involved, definitely, but Susan wasn't looking at him anymore. She turned to someone off camera. Jason squinted at his screen, trying to see who it was, then he heard it, footsteps. Real ones, not a Zoom sound effect. And then the door behind him creaked open. The door swung open like it had been waiting for its cue. Jason turned, confused. He was mid-sentence, something about quarterly accountability metrics, when he heard the sound of heels clicking across the hardwood. His smile faltered. He looked off-screen, expecting maybe a catering staff or some last-minute assistant with a water bottle. But it was me. I stepped into the boardroom with the kind of calm you earn the hard way, 6 months in the trenches, 100 broken promises deep, and one deleted name away from permanent erasure. I didn't speak, didn't nod, didn't even look at him. I walked around the table with slow, deliberate steps, a folder tucked under one arm, and stopped right next to Susan. She didn't say a word. She just turned to me, expression unchanged, and slid her chair back half an inch. That was the moment Jason knew. It was subtle, like watching a souffle collapse in real time. His face twitched just slightly. The bravado slipped off his shoulders like an ill-fitted coat. His hand hovered near the laptop, as if maybe there was still time to click something, hide something, spin something. Jason, Susan said, cutting through the tension like a scalpel, I'm confused. He cleared his throat. About what? She tilted her head ever so slightly. About who I've been negotiating this deal with. Jason blinked too fast. Well, I mean, we've all been involved, obviously. Anne's done a lot of the operational support, but I'm sorry, she said, cutting him off completely. Who are you again? Silence. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. I'm Jason, he said, voice dropping to something almost human, director of strategic accounts. We've had calls every Thursday. I sent the integration deck. Susan turned to me. Diane, do you have the statement of work? I opened the folder. Inside, the original SOW. Annotated, signed, countersigned. My name in bold on the executive summary. Her initials on every page. Attached were my call logs, my integration milestone receipts, and an internal email from her tech lead that said, word for word, if Diane's not in the room, we pause the project. I laid it on the table like a blade. Jason's face drained of color. He looked at the paper like it was radioactive. Susan didn't look at him. She didn't need to. She turned to her own lawyer and said, please finalize this version. The lawyer nodded. Jason reached out a hand as if to object, as if there was still a thread to pull. Susan looked at him, calm as a bomb with the pin still in her hand. We'll need you to leave the room now. Jason didn't move. She didn't repeat herself. He stood slowly, still trying to piece together a sentence, a strategy, a way out. But there was nothing left for him to stand on. No deck, no narrative, no illusion. He shuffled out, a man who'd spent 6 months building a house on someone else's land, and just watched the deed get handed back to the owner. Susan turned to me once the door closed. You good? I nodded once. Great, she said. Let's get this done. And we did. No drama, no loud speeches. Just signatures and silence, punctuated only by the soft scratch of pen on paper and the kind of tension that lingers when a lie collapses in real time. Jason thought he was the closer, but I was the architect, and now finally I had the keys. I stayed until the last signature was dry. Susan's lawyer gathered the documents like they were evidence in a federal case, which, given the corporate theater we'd just endured, wasn't far off. The statement of work now lived in ink, not just memory. My name in black, crisp letters. My initials beside hers. A deal built on 6 months of late nights, personal flights, and 1,000 quiet fixes. I closed my folder. Jason's chair still sat empty near the end of the table, pushed slightly askew like a ghost had bolted from it in a panic. I didn't bother glancing at it. Susan leaned back and exhaled, the way you do after closing something that was never just business. That, she said, was overdue. Her COO chuckled under his breath. Her lawyer didn't even bother hiding his smirk. I'll notify our side, he said, stacking papers. I'll be thrilled. You handled this cleanly, Diane. I smiled. I try. He nodded. Try harder than most. Succeed more than all. Susan looked at me then, not as a vendor, not as a line item in some procurement software, but as something closer to a peer. And in her gaze there was no sympathy, no pity, just clarity. So she said, I got your acceptance letter. I paused, then allowed myself the smallest, realest grin of the entire quarter. You did. The room stilled again. But this time in the good way, the hush that comes before a quiet round of applause, the reverence of watching a knife slide home clean. You sure about this? She asked. It's a big shift. New city. New fire to walk through. I'm sure, I said. I've danced through worse. She nodded once. No fanfare. Just mutual respect folded into a moment. Because that was the twist no one saw coming. While Jason was busy polishing his LinkedIn and fabricating a narrative he couldn't even back up with timestamps, I was on late-night calls with Susan's board liaison. I wasn't just negotiating a deal, I was auditioning. And they saw me. Not the assistant, not the behind-the-scenes fixer. Me. I'd signed the offer 3 days ago, Director of Strategic Accounts for Cygnus Sec's parent company, reporting directly to the board. My salary, double. My autonomy, total. Jason's name wouldn't even pass through those halls again. As we stood to leave, Susan handed me a sealed envelope. First day instructions, she said. Be ready. We move fast. Perfect, I said. I don't do slow anymore. I left the room the same way I'd entered, calm, straight-backed, folder in hand. No need to slam doors or take a bow. The work had already spoken. The paper had been signed. The lie had been burned to ash. And Jason, he wouldn't recover from this one. Not quickly. Maybe not ever, because it wasn't just the job he lost. It was the illusion that he could rewrite other people's stories without paying for the ink. As I reached the elevator, I heard Susan behind me, talking to her assistant. Turns out, she said, leadership recognizes leadership. And for the first time in 6 months, I finally felt seen. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.